Hello and welcome to this, the third of 3 video lectures about the human value of science. It is called Human Values Thinking and explores the question, do human values help explain the human condition? At the start of this series of video lectures, in the introduction to understanding ourselves through our human values, there was an assertion. That assertion was, human values lie latent within us, those human values of liberty, progress, tolerance, and science. But there is a conceit in this assertion, because those 4 values that characterize reason is right, version 2, social order, are the Enlightenment values, which are a shorthand for that age of reason, which begs the question, is it too arrogant to take Western Enlightenment values and call them human values? Well, maybe. But what else but human values, plus of course fossil fuels, explains the sustained breakthrough progress of the last 200 years, starting in Europe? Something happened in Europe over 2 centuries ago which led to an exponential rise in our social development. This lecture series has been mostly about how that breakthrough came about and how it was sustained. The only additional ingredient required was fossil fuels. And those values spread out from the European backwater where the Industrial Revolution started, the bleak, rain-soaked Pennine Hills in northern England, to all the continents of the earth, infiltrating many different cultures. Those values that crystallized into the ascent of humans from poverty and tribalism into modernity have demonstrated by their widespread adoption that they are universal. So no, it's not too arrogant to call liberty, progress, tolerance, and science our human values. Is it arrogant enough? Judeo-Christian values, Jerusalem, and the Greek gift of reason, Athens, as Ben Shapiro puts it, he says Judeo-Christian values bring together Jerusalem and Athens, and that's his main thesis in his book, The Right Side of History. He makes the case that the modernity we experience today is down to the coming together of 2 things, the moral values of the Judeo-Christian heritage and the capacity for reason handed down from the ancient Greeks. Having a historical memory of when reason tried to prevail before helps, and any age of reason has to acknowledge that inheritance. But that's not the whole story. It doesn't account for the geographical luck involved in the West's rise, and only partially accounts for the good fortune, the cultural good fortune of the West's individualistic culture. As described in the lectures on the human value of progress, having the geographical luck to be situated in the Earth's temperate zone meant that the West developed agricultural civilizations first. That was when the West included the Middle East. The West means the western part of the Eurasian continents. So it started in the Middle East, which is part of the western end of the Eurasian continent. And in the 2-horse race with China, at the other end of the Eurasian continent, the eastern end, the 2-horse race with China to be the first to break through progress, having an individualistic culture was the West's good cultural fortune. The Judeo-Christian tradition is based on the divinity of the individual, so that has to be an important part of the West's individualistic culture. But also important was the additional geographical luck of having the Mediterranean as a means of connecting disparate tribes for trade and the sharing of knowledge. And the West had multiple different agricultural civilizations, which builds in some dynamism. 500 years ago, Europe was a hothouse of competing power centers, each individually seeking power through war, trade, and scheming. Then the Reformation happened, followed by 130 years of religious wars, leading to freedom of conscience. That was the foundation of the mutual restraint that replaced mighty's right with the rule of law. The development of the dynamic, diverse, individualistic culture that beat China's more static monoculture to breakthrough progress was a long and bloody affair, not all of it down to the way God was worshipped. And the Jerusalem-Athens thesis does not explain how Japanese and other cultures could adopt human values and flourish, or that atheists find no problem with those human values. And just as descendancy from Judeo-Christian traditions is not required for the adoption of human values, it is not acceptable. Cultural hegemony is not acceptable for Japan, for atheists and others to adopt. You can't have Judeo-Christian values forced onto other cultures like Japan or other religions, like other faiths, I should say, like atheism. They adopted human values irrespective of where they came from originally. So just as descendancy from Judeo-Christian traditions is not required for the adoption of human values, it is not acceptable. Part of the universality of human values is that they have been adopted and sustained by a wide variety of people and peoples. Are the human values missing something? Those 4 human values of liberty, progress, tolerance, science. Version 1, social order, had sacred religions to provide coherence, to bring people together, something transcendent to bring people together. Version 2, social order, has growth, increasing knowledge, wealth, and health. There's nothing spiritual in the template for version 2, social order. But many communities and individuals carry their religion over from the version 1 of agricultural civilizations to the version 2 of advanced industrial societies. Because there's nothing spiritual that is central to modern Western society, as there was in the past, in the West today, faith is an individual choice, not society enforced as it was and is in agricultural civilizations. And that absence of God in society is felt by some philosophers, at least. Nietzsche said famously, God is dead. Less famously, he said, is there any up or down left? Nietzsche's famous line is famous because it captures that loss, captures that absence of God. And he goes further, asking if there's no up, the place where we are all heading, and no down, the place we all want to avoid, what is there to guide us on our way through life? Nietzsche forecast the rise of extreme politics, which we can recognize in 20th century fascism and Marxism. The reason being that, with God not around to provide it, people needed something else, something transcendent to believe in. This was 150 years ago, and thinkers today are still searching for an answer. How do we find direction when God is dead and we don't know what is up and what is down? Thinkers today sense a space where something should be. Just 2 of them I'll mention here. David Brooks thinks we're missing deep and meaningful relationships. Jordan Peterson thinks we're missing, or can miss, purpose and responsibility. Missing something or not, human values provide a useful framework for examining the human condition. And what about the nomination of liberty as the core human value? Is that universal? Many in the civilizational state of China would argue that unity is the core value. Unity, presumably at any price, is certainly the core value of the Chinese Communist Party. They follow the thousands of years old idea of a Greater China as a civilizational state. The problem is, it only seems to apply to the Han Chinese who make up 90% of modern China. Many non-Han citizens of Greater China would disagree. Buddhist Tibetans or Muslim Uyghurs. And the Han Chinese themselves are not a unified whole. There's Taiwan and Hong Kong. Unity is by necessity the core value of a civilizational state. But there is no single human state. Unity, or other words we might use, meaning unity like solidarity, can't be applied across the different tribes of humanity, except by might is right force. The Chinese Communist Party enforces unity through might is right coerced cooperation. They enforce it on the tribes it deems are part of Greater China. To unite the many different tribes of humanity, reason is right human values have so far proved far more successful. So there's one alternative, unity, an alternative to liberty as the core human value. For another alternative, we can look to Marxists and neo-Marxists because they argue that equality of outcomes should be the core human value. They say equality trumps prosperity, freedom, and everything else. But for the equality end, the means is always coerced cooperation. Neil Ferguson has pointed out that there have been two natural experiments, and we can add a third from South America. Three natural experiments then: North versus South Korea, East versus West Germany, Venezuela versus Venezuela versus Chile. These three pairings are very close in geography and culture, but with radically different ideas and institutions. The result of these experiments is clear. The human values idea of rational cooperation, reason is right, has proven far superior to coerced cooperation, might is right. North Korea is a might is right country, South Korea, reason is right. East Germany was a might is right Marxist regime. West Germany was a reason is right democracy. Venezuela is Marxist, might is right. Chile more towards the reason is right open democratic country. And in the 20th century, around 100 million humans died in the failed Marxist attempt to impose equality of outcomes with might is right. So many of us would reject equality of outcomes as a core human value, given the body count from the 20th century. Some would argue that the core human value should be science. But we face wicked problems with science-led disagreement. Science is no longer neutral, if it ever was. For individually conscious beings with free will and minds of our own, liberty is the core human value. There are many critiques of the Western idea of liberty, which is asserted to be the core human value in this video lecture series. A good example of those critiques is David Brooks' article in the New York Times in 2019 called 5 Lies Our Culture Tells. Let's briefly run through Brooks's 5 lies. Number 1, lie number 1, career success is fulfilling. The truth is, though, success spares you from the shame you might experience if you feel yourself a failure, but career success alone does not provide positive peace or fulfillment, says Brooks. Line number 2, I can make myself happy. But he says, this is the lie of self-sufficiency. This is the lie that happiness is an individual accomplishment. As he says sarcastically, if I can have just one more victory, if I can just lose 15 pounds, or if I could just get better at meditation, then I will be happy. Of course, he regards that as a lie. You cannot make yourself happy. His third lie is life is an individual journey. This lie, he says, encourages people to believe freedom is the absence of restraint. Be unattached, stay on the move, keep your options open. But it doesn't work like that for most people, he says. By planting themselves in one neighborhood, one organization, or one mission, they earn trust. They have the freedom to make a lasting difference. It's the chains we choose that set us free. That's Brooks again, with a profound thought about the fact that we are social animals just as much as individually conscious. It's the chains we choose that set us free. That's a profound thought. Line number 4, you have to find your own truth. This is the privatization of meaning. Come up with your own answers to life's ultimate questions. The problem is that unless your name is Aristotle, a famous Greek philosopher, for those who don't recognize that name, you probably can't do it, because finding the truth is a group process. Brooks says it's not up to the schools to teach a coherent set of moral values or a society. You do you. The reality is that values are created and passed down by strong, self-confident communities and institutions. People absorb their values by submitting to communities and institutions and taking part in the conversations that take place within them. Again, Brooks, emphasizing the fact that we are social animals. We are not on our own as free individuals or otherwise. And line number 5, rich and successful people are worth more than poorer and less successful people. The emotion of the meritocracy is conditional love, that if you perform well, people will love you. The anthropology of the meritocracy is that you are not a soul to be saved, but a set of skills to be maximized. He goes further. The message of the meritocracy is that you are what you accomplish. The false promise of the meritocracy is that you can earn dignity by attaching yourself to prestigious brands. The sociology of the meritocracy is that society is organized around a set of inner rings with the high achievers inside and everyone else further out. In other words, this lie tells you that you are a soulless individual who can only find meaning in their relative success. What's your net worth? How many virtual friends do you have? How many community hours can you claim on your resume? Reading David Brooks and the many other commentators like him, you can soon come to the conclusion that the West's stressing of liberty, a form of the word liberalism, is somehow a bad thing. But that is not their message. Their message is a conservative one. Modern humans cannot live by liberty alone. They need social order as well. This is shown pictorially with the logo for this video series. Liberty is core because we are individually conscious beings with free will and minds of our own. That is the core of what we humans are. But liberty is expanded with progress and tolerance. Progress means expanding the positive freedom of increasing our capacity to act on our own free will. Progress means increasing knowledge, wealth, and health, so that humanity moves ever further away from the extreme poverty of nature into which we became conscious. Tolerance means reducing the negativity of restraint on our own actions. Tolerance means freedom of conscience, freedom of enterprise, freedom of choice. As step by step, we disinherit ourselves from the limitations of the tribalism of our ancestors. Both progress and tolerance are aspects of society, aspects of the social animal part of human nature. We are individually conscious, stressed by liberals, and social animals, stressed by conservatives, at the same time. Modern Western societies incorporate both the liberal idea of liberty and the conservative idea of social order. In the model we see here, liberty is the core. It is the black box at the start. Expanding liberty is the orange cone with black boxes representing the two ways society expands liberty: progress and tolerance. The orange cone represents society's social order, which, by the way, includes our communities. That's local communities, faith groups, the organizations we work for, the civic identities we collectively adopt, and families, as well as the nation state we are citizens of. Modern Western societies developed the social order of rational cooperation as a way to expand liberty through progress and tolerance. A key part of that social order is the harnessing of the natural clash between liberalism, stressing the individualistic nature of humans, and conservatism, stressing the social animal nature of humanity, bringing those together in democratic political processes. That orange cone represents social order, and it is rich with humanity. To sum up on the orange cone, agricultural civilizations, social order version 1 was all about coerced cooperation. There was no liberty, a little bit of progress, and no tolerance other than the occasional act of mercy of the mighty. So that orange cone meant nothing back then in the West and doesn't mean that much in non-Western societies today. Modern Western societies, advanced industrial societies, we have social order version 2, which is about rational cooperation, where liberty is core and is expanded through rapid progress and increasing tolerance. Today in the West, that orange cone represents social order, the rational cooperation that expands liberty with progress and tolerance. Individually conscious, hence liberty. Social animal, hence family, community, society. Final slide. So let's have a go at modern Western society. Let's use our human values to critique where we are today. First up, liberty. We started the previous slide with one of David Brooks's tirades about the state of individualism in the West today, those 5 lies. He is one of the most eloquent and insightful commentators on the downside of individual freedom, when it turns into the egoistic admiration of one's idealized self. That's as Wikipedia describes narcissism. Brooks again, liberty is turning into narcissism. We're living with the excesses of 60 years of hyper-individualism, the idea that life is an individual journey towards personal fulfillment. Here again, you do you, he says. There's a lot of emphasis in our culture on personal freedom self-interest, self-expression. Some of that is part of liberty, but craving for self-esteem is just like any other addiction. It consumes the addicted. Liberty is being questioned by the very people who enjoy it. What about progress? Well, we hear a lot about environmental degradation. Too much progress becomes environmental degradation. Have we overdone social development? Should we all become vegans or go back to subsistence farming or living in caves? As Jonathan Haidt puts it, we seems we're living above our design constraints. Decades ago, we repaired the hole in the ozone layer quietly and without fuss. It was just a job that needed doing, albeit a big and important job. In the West, air and water quality has steadily improved to the point where most of us breathe unpolluted air, and a beach that doesn't meet strict quality standards is an unpleasant surprise, rather than the routine holiday experience it used to be. But something seems to have changed. Maybe biodiversity loss, land use concerns, plastic waste, and the impact of CO2 emissions is just overwhelming us. We seem frozen in inaction when it comes to climate change, only able to demonstrate, write reports, and set targets. Where is the ozone layer spirit of agreeing what the problem is, identifying a solution that fixed the problem without impoverishing anyone, and then doing it? Our failure to agree, plan and act means that all the progress we have made and are making with increased knowledge, wealth and health is drowned out by the fears about environmental degradation. Progress is being questioned. And boy, do we miss religion. Tolerance brings nihilism. As Roger Cohen in the article cited below said, liberalism worked well for a while. It was good at freeing people from bigotry, sexism, racism, but less good at providing people with meaning to their lives beyond hedonism and materialism. Something solid, something sacred, some moral guidance, a purpose in life. That's what religion provided in the past. Left to our own thoughts and feelings, many of us discover a meaninglessness defined as nihilism. Hedonism adds to our critique of liberty. Materialism to our critique of progress. The winner is the one who has the most experiences, that's knowledge, or dies with the most toys, that's wealth, or dies last, that's health. If that's all life has to offer people, then we shouldn't be surprised when many ask, what is the point? That's a nihilistic question. What is the point? Which brings us to the fourth human value, science. The previous presentation, the previous lecture on climate change painted a picture of science as just politics by other means, as science is used to arm two sides in a disagreement. Science has led to the Anthropocene, or some scientists believe that to be the case, where we humans have become a third force of nature. We could gene edit our humanity away, fear some. Or we could let AI, artificial intelligence, just make us redundant. Science, together with technology and innovation, has made humanity a third force of nature alongside the physical universe and Mother Nature herself. We can punch a hole in the ozone layer. We dominate the nitrogen cycle with fertilizer, change the flow of mighty rivers with dams, change the face of the earth with deforestation, change the ocean's chemistry, release energy from the atom, and some say we can even control the weather. We are entering an age where we hold our fate largely in our own hands. no longer the passive object of the physical universe's randomness and Mother Nature's moods. The age we can call the Anthropocene, and it's not only the environment that we impact. With gene editing, we can change ourselves, maybe even become something post-human, or more accurately, developed human, consciously developed human. And where will the development of artificial intelligence take us? We must cling to the hope that the computer programmers keep fitting those on-off switches. So there we are. Our human values have led us to our own doom. Or maybe not. Maybe we're just having a bad time of it at the moment, particularly in the West, especially in the Anglosphere, the English-speaking regions of the world. Think about it. As societies, we have just come through a wrenching change, with mass migration from agricultural village life to big industrial cities. Women have been liberated from the home en masse and taken their rightful place in society. We are at the beginning of the healing of the scourge of global tribalism, also known as racism, that European-led globalization brought to us starting 500 years ago. And we are taking note of and starting to fix the damage to our environment that exponential progress and the accompanying population boom has done. But for whatever reason, we seem to have succumbed to what Jennifer Jacket calls the anthroplacebo effect, a certain pessimism that makes us accept human destruction as inevitable, a psychological condition that exacerbates human-induced damage. Nowhere is this assumption that human destruction is inevitable more apparent than with climate change. Those who fear the effect of dumping 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year also fear the obvious answer, which is to switch from fossil fuels to nuclear power for energy generation. So nothing is done, and emissions continue to rise. In my research for this video presentation series, Understanding Ourselves Through Our Human Values, Jennifer Jacket's explanation was the best I could find that explains what's going on in Western society today. There is some kind of mass psychological condition that induces pessimism and despair. Let it be called the anthroplacebo effect. But that contrasts with what most of my research told me. My research found something different and far more hopeful about us humans and our human values. For this amateur historian, even more amateurish psychologist and novice political scientist, the social sciences describe a hardy, adaptable, and creative being. Successful too. Thank you for watching. This was the last in the series, Understanding Ourselves Through Our Human Values. You can find all the video lectures of this series at www.conservatus.com, where there's reasoning that resonates. Conservatus, keep safe, intact, safe from danger, our human values.